Hey, this is Gordon for Inspiration Tats, and in this video we're gonna create actually this crossbow in 3ds Max and Substance Painter. And thank you for my Patreons for helping me make this. And yeah, let's go to 3ds Max. Alright, so the first step in creating this crossbow in 3ds Max and Substance Painter is actually the high poly modeling. So as you can see here, we're gonna start off with a simple box, and then we're gonna build our way to create the complex stuff as we go. So here we are starting with the stock, which is gonna be the wooden part, and also another part that is gonna be metal. So here we're gonna shape the grip that is gonna be created by wood. And as you can see here, I'm trying to actually kind of sculpt it a little bit and try to give it the basic form or the shape that we're going for. So here probably we're gonna add some chamfering on the sides, and we're gonna add a little bit more details as we go. And we're gonna use some of the parts here in order to actually create the other part, the metallic part that is going to be attached to it. So we're going to actually use or copy some of the polygons in order to start creating the rest of the pieces. So it's going to be a poly extrusion and edge extrusion for the most part. And after that, we're going to actually attach these pieces together and all these vertices and stuff. And we're gonna do edge extrusion or poly extrusion in this case here. And after that we're gonna go to create the more complex details, and we're gonna actually build to that slowly, bit by bit, until we are able to reach a final point in which we can consider the modeling of the high poly actually acceptably done to a certain extent. Alright, so as you can see here, I'm trying to connect the wooden part with the metallic part because they are kind of integrated nicely. And I personally like to model or create weapons that are kind of part wood and part metal, because that wooden element actually adds a lot more to the weapon, especially in the texturing process, because as we add these textures, it's going to actually make it look a lot more kind of interesting, instead of making it actually all of it from wood or all of it from metal or just one basic material. So here I'm trying to create an arc, and we're gonna convert to editable poly after we render it in actually enable it for render, enable the rendering feature in the editable spline or any kind of 2D shape. And after that we're gonna convert to editable poly, and we are gonna try to integrate it with the stock we created previously. And we're gonna try to actually smoothly integrate these two pieces together by adding some lines or some edges. And this is going to allow us to actually create a nice curve that we're going to use. And this is also all subject to change, because later probably we're going to change all of this just in case we're going to face some problems with proportion and stuff, because yeah, sometimes you're gonna see that it does not fit properly with the rest of the pieces, and change might be necessary in these kind of cases, because you want to see something good at the end of the day. So here I'm trying to extrude part in the top, which is gonna be very important as well. And there are gonna be a few pieces here, and yeah, this basically here we're trying to actually block out the some of the major pieces that we're gonna work with. And most of them are simple, they're not complicated, but actually they kind of add some interesting stuff. And the shape and the look and the general overlook of this weapon is actually sculpted by these little pieces, these separated pieces, which is actually working on them is basically better than actually creating something that is going to be all kind of one piece. And it's going to be a little bit not as easy. It's not about, it's not in terms of difficulty that you're thinking about, but it's actually more fun to create separate pieces and try to attach them together, and it's gonna give you more control actually, especially in the process that they're gonna be coming next, like unwrapping and stuff. It's gonna be easier to actually work with separate pieces. So here I'm trying to create the limb of the of this crossbow, and of course there is going to be a gradual process of scaling, since in the close to the body of the weapon is going to be wide, and as we go to the sides it's going to be narrow, and bit by bit we're going to actually scale a little bit. And here I'm trying to create a capsule which is going to be on the sides, and that piece here is actually created for the string of this crossbow, because it's gonna be the piece that is gonna be support the tension or the pressure that is gonna be applied when trying to hold the string in the edges of these limbs here. And yeah, overall we don't have to attach it together to that part, because there's no need to do it like this. And sometimes, as you can see here, I'm trying to change the size and the length on some pieces as we go, because as we model we're gonna see some necessary things we probably need to do. And there is another thing I would like to talk about, which is the fact that if I'm gonna create, for the most part, if I'm gonna create an additional piece, if this piece is gonna be actually is going to be laying down on the surface that is related to the that is going to be the body, or the general body of the weapon or the model you're working on, I usually don't go to the menu and create something generic or some of the basic geometry. I just actually use some of the polygons existing right there, and I'm going to copy them and detach them from it, because it's going to be exactly what I want it to be. And there are a lot of good things about this method, because first of all it saves you time, and it gives you a lot more accuracy. So now here we're trying to create the arrow, and yeah, and some of the details that we have to sculpt in the in this arc here. And of course I think here that after modeling and working on it a little bit and adding some pieces, and taking a look at the proportion of all the other pieces, it seems like here we need to change how this piece looks, especially its size and its thickness. The thickness of this one here is not something I liked that much, because it kind of looked like too kind of thin. I want it to be thicker and kind of looks like more intimidating and more kind of bulky and stuff. So here I'm gonna use some lines in order to create some test some floating geometry, because there are some pieces we need to create, and I just wanted to see if this is gonna work or not, because later we're gonna add, actually I knew it's gonna work, but I just want to do it because yeah, just to do it, because I wanted to actually add it in that position. And it's good also if you're working on something, it's better actually to create it completely, and when you are done you gotta jump to the other thing. I usually don't do this because it's a little bit confusing, because when you start working on something you better finish it before you jump to another step. And the creating floating geometry, some people actually create it on the fly, because they kind of create, for example, just say creating the stock, and as they work on the stock they are going to create everything that is on top of that piece related to the high poly. They're going to create all the details, and then you're gonna, for example, jump to create the barrel. They create all the details including a floating geometry and everything, and sometimes they create the support edges as they go, which is a good thing sometimes, but I don't prefer this method, because I want to build up slowly, step by step and piece by piece, and I'm gonna increase the complexity as I go. And I think this is more effective, because it gives you more control if you want to change some things, or if you want to go back a little bit and actually modify some of these stuff you've done. And kind of it's gonna give you more control, because this method is gonna help you to integrate stuff and kind of push everything in the same direction, and they go in the same level as you advance, as you create more pieces. So here I'm trying to create the bottom part of the stock. There are some actually the metallic part is gonna extend to the bottom also of the stock, and there are some actually the same thing that happens on top is gonna happen from the bottom. I actually didn't notice it until I did notice it, but I wasn't aware that I didn't work on it, because there are a lot of things to create here. Sometimes you forget to add some things and you're gonna go back to create them. And here we are trying to create the trigger area. So this is gonna be the trigger guard. We're gonna create this tube here. This tube here is gonna represent the trigger guard, and after that we're gonna delete part of it, make it a little bit narrower, and probably we're gonna create also the area in which the trigger itself is gonna break through, and yeah, the trigger is gonna be a very simple piece. It is very simple, and you wanna put it there and give it some thickness. And basically this part is extremely simple. And yeah, for now we can see that, as we see here, there are a lot of things that we've done, and we are almost done. So here we're gonna try to create the string, which is gonna be created using a line, and we're gonna try to draw basically the path that is gonna walk through. And after that we're gonna give it some thickness and add some little pieces around it, which is gonna be also very important. So, and we're gonna change the thickness and the position of some of the vertices as we go. Later we're gonna have to actually use some of the polygons from the string itself in order to create a little piece that is gonna actually keep everything in place, because there are some kind of yeah, when the string ends, there is gonna be a solid piece, metallic piece, that is gonna keep the two ends together, or just one end with the main part and keep it in place, whatever. And now we are going to create, actually, as you can see here, some floating geometry. So here starts the real part of creating floating geometry, and here I'm gonna try to create two parts, and I'm gonna try to fuse and weld these pieces together. So two basic splines, create them, and then weld them. And as you can see here, give it some 3D dimension, give it some kind of enable it to be rendered in viewport, and delete one half. Then we're gonna have to flip the normals, and because usually when we delete, and the part facing us is gonna be black, because the normals aren't gonna be on the other side, and we need to flip them. And this is it. And for now we're gonna add a little bit of actually this piece here is gonna be a common theme all around, because it's gonna be all around the place. So yeah, we're gonna copy it couple of times, probably here and there, and I think after that we can say that we are done with blocking out the high poly model. And later we're gonna start adding some support edges. So now here we are in support edges, and we're gonna use one of the basic and very important tools, which is gonna be Swift Loop. So this is gonna allow us to be very quick and add in support edges all over the place. So we're gonna actually use some materials here just to help us know where exactly what exactly the pieces that we are done with, and what are those that we still need to work on. And sometimes the process of support edges actually demands that we actually make sure that everything is in place. And because if we're not actually sure that we have done the modeling and all the basic mesh that we need to create, then it's going to be a little bit difficult to go back. Not that hard, but it's going to consume a little bit more time, because you need to work again and sometimes remove some of these supporting edges if you already done that, and it's gonna be a pain, and you know what I mean, of course. And here is gonna be the same thing. We're gonna try to support all the areas that need to be supported all over the place, and probably sometimes we need actually to add some pieces here and there, as I said. And it's going to be as I said, it's going to be a process in which we're gonna make sure that everything is in place, and it's gonna determine the end of the high poly modeling. And when we do actually support edges and stuff, it means that we are ready to jump to the next stage. So we better make sure that everything is correct and everything is in place. Sometimes you need to actually create another layer for the low poly, because later, as you know, the next step, which is gonna be creating the low poly model, sometimes in the layer explorer in 3ds Max, you need to create another layer in which is gonna be actually specifically created to create the low poly, because the low poly is gonna be stripped of everything, like support edges, modifiers like turbo smooth, and all the edges and all the vertices that are not gonna be directly affecting the silhouette of the model, and all the pieces included. So we don't want to actually create supported edges and stuff, and the modifiers like turbo smooth and for multiple pieces, and we're gonna have to delete everything later. So this is gonna consume a little bit more time. But on the other hand, if you actually create that layer, it's gonna mean also that any changes that you are gonna create on the high poly model for the basic mesh, it means that it's not gonna be part of that layer that you created. So it's kind of your choice, actually. If you know what you're doing, then you're gonna be all good. Because also when we do baking, you better make sure that we are gonna make sure that the high poly and the low poly are completely identical, and they have the same basic geometry. So this is gonna guarantee that the baking is gonna be done properly without missing any pieces whatsoever. So now we are gonna jump to part 3, which is gonna be low poly creation for the so this is actually the layer that I was talking about, and we are gonna actually remove all the edges that we don't need, and we're gonna weld a lot of pieces together. So a lot of vertices are gonna be welded and a lot of edges are gonna be removed, because we are gonna strip this model and all the pieces included from we're gonna strip them and from all the unnecessary stuff. So here we're doing this, and this process, I find it to be not that tedious. It's a little bit more fun, not like unwrapping and stuff. Even in UV unwrapping, it's kind of, if you actually set the actually you get over time you're gonna get sick of it. But if you have something to do in the background, like you're listening to something or even talking to somebody, it's so automatic, dude. It's something that kind of your hands and kind of your automatic mind knows to do if you are used to it. You don't have to think about it too much when you get used to it and you do it that much. So here, as you can see, it seems like there are a lot of edges and a lot of vertices that we don't need, and they don't actually shape and control the overall look of this model and all the pieces included. So we have permission to remove them, and we are authorized to delete them as much as they don't affect the model that much. And I personally I want to be a little bit careful when it comes to actually curves and arcs and stuff, because we don't want to strip these pieces of too much kind of details and stuff, because we need to keep that smooth curves sometimes, because baking is not a magic pill. Baking is just some kind of calculations of light, and maybe some mathematical stuff that give the illusion that a low poly model looks like a high poly, but we don't need to push it too much. We don't push our luck that hard. We don't want to push it too far, because as I said, when it comes to curved areas and stuff, I'm a little bit conservative. You can take it to that level, but be careful there. So here are smoothing groups. I never talked about smoothing groups before, I guess. Not specifically, but it's a very important process. I don't talk about it too much, but since I've been doing longer videos, it's literally very hard to include everything. So with these time-lapse video, I can talk about them. So here, these smoothing groups are actually groups in which you're going to use them mostly for the low poly, but it actually indicates and actually separates the groups. Actually, these groups kind of how 3ds Max deals with light, and kind of how the separation when it comes to polygon is going to be selected. So it's kind of basically groups of polygons, and it's highly related to smoothing. So that's why they call it smoothing groups. So in each model, in each piece, we're gonna select certain groups, and they're gonna follow certain smoothing surfaces, and each group is gonna be smooth individual. This is basically what it is. Now, as you can see here, UV unwrapping is actually the process in which we're going to actually unwrap everything, and after we prepared it basically by converting the high poly model to a low poly model, and we created smoothing groups. This is gonna help us to actually unwrap everything, and actually make everything we're gonna put everything from the 3D aspect. We're gonna change it to something that is gonna be 2D, which is gonna be very practical for texture, and that's why we do UV unwrapping, because we want it to be possible for us to bake all the maps and to do some texturing later on. So most of these pieces are not gonna be difficult to work with, because probably the most annoying things I found here in this weapon is these long arcs right there, and all the separate pieces that I had to unwrap individually and stuff. It's a little bit annoying to stack in the when it comes to packing, which is gonna be at the end of the UV unwrapping process. So I think this is the fifth part of this process, and it's a little bit it's gonna be probably the longest after modeling, because modeling is obviously high poly modeling is gonna take the most important part of our tutorial, and any part of anything we create, because it's the most important thing. And UV unwrapping is not that hard, but sometimes you gotta think a little bit, use a little bit of that brain you have in order to figure out some situations, figure out the solution to these situations. But for the most part, it's gonna be highly automatic. You don't even need to think about it once you get used to it. So this piece here is interesting, and there are a lot of pieces that we're gonna unwrap easily. And this piece here, we had to actually do unwrapping using a different approach, which is actually by cutting seams and stuff. And I think it's better to actually use this method here, because the body that we unwrapped right there is kind of obviously had separate pieces that are kind of obviously defined, and it was a little bit difficult to use some automatic unwrapping procedure, which is gonna mess things up. So doing it manually was the best options for us right there. So here it's for the most part, Unwrapping is, I like to actually smash everything against the wall, and the pieces that are gonna stick, the kind of the pieces that 3ds Max knows how to unwrap correctly, I'm gonna put them aside, and the pieces that are gonna be screwed up and actually separated and actually kind of messed up, I'm gonna actually try to attach them and stitch everything together, then then put them aside with pieces that were originally working just fine. And this is the process that goes on and on until we reach the end, and we will actually pack all these pieces together in the process that we will call packing the UVs, in order to create a cool and nice UV template in the end. So yeah, as I said before, it's gonna be repetitive, and you don't have to think about it too much. Just do it, just keep going, and it's gonna be interesting. I think UV unwrapping is one of the processes that at first is gonna be hard to conceptualize and to apply, because you don't know nothing about it. And if you're a beginner, and UV unwrapping is kind of a process that kind of you need to study it. You need to actually know the rules and how it works, because it's not as easy as when you see me, when you hear me talking about how easy it is and how automatic it is and how you can do it without thinking about it. I'm talking about when you get used to it, and when you know the rules, and when you know a lot of things about it. But if you're new to it, it's gonna be a pain, because lack of knowledge and lack of experience is gonna make you a little bit confused when it comes to the decisions that you're gonna take. And I found it also, if you are new to unwrapping and stuff, you need to do it repetitively, and you need to do training exercises back to back in order to actually help solidify these principles in your brain, in your automatic brain, in order for it to integrate this process in your workflow and make it a little bit automatic as you go. And it's gonna be fun at first, but when you get used to it, probably gonna get sick of it. That's why it's better to do something as you create, as you unwrap these pieces. And with the developed and new software, it's gonna be especially the seams. Make sure that I actually created a video in which I explain everything about unwrapping for games, and one of the most important stuff you need to pay attention to is the seams, especially when you have something like something curved or cylindrical or spherical. Make sure that these seams are not going to be obvious, especially in the most visible areas. Make sure you hide your seams professionally, because sometimes it's gonna be too close to the camera and it's gonna be seen, even though the software we have today is gonna allow us somehow to hide these seams, and you're not gonna notice them. So this is it for UV unwrapping, and after we unwrap everything, we're gonna do pack all the UVs together. And personally, this is the most fun part of all the process of unwrapping. This is what I like about UV unwrapping. It's like, for me, it's like a puzzle, and I talk about this in all my videos, because actually it's fun. It's like a game, trying to put these pieces all together in one place and try to actually solve this puzzle that has a million solutions to it, and all of them are correct and wrong in the same time. So here we are, and we're gonna try to organize everything and bring everything closer to the one by one rectangle, and try to separate the pieces that are gonna be duplicated. Be careful, because there are some pieces that are duplicated, and you don't want to discover that thing too late, because early on you're gonna separate all the pieces, prevent overlapping UVs in the beginning, and then you're gonna have a clear idea about what you have here, and you're going to be good to go as you actually figure out how many pieces you have, and the only thing you have to deal with is how to place them inside this 1 by 1 rectangle here. And it's gonna be a challenge, and it's gonna be fun to work with in the same time. And every position you create is also subject to change, because sometimes you're gonna figure out that some of the pieces that you placed are gonna be better placed in another place, which is okay. You don't have to be so rigid, and if you see that some pieces need to be changed, the position of some of these pieces needs to be changed, it's okay to change that and place it in another place, which is gonna be a good thing if you see that this change is gonna be effective and more more beneficial for the overall process. Okay, and if you actually if you find yourself in a situation where you have to create more space, then you're gonna select everything, and then you're gonna scale it down, make everything a little bit smaller to create more room for the pieces that you couldn't fit inside. You don't have to actually to pack everything perfectly, because there's no way to do this. There's always more room than you have, there's more room to actually work with. So we're gonna leave some empty places here. We're gonna name all the parts for baking, and all the pieces here need to be named, because the technology has developed over the years, and we have software like Substance Painter, which is gonna be working with something that we call baking by names, by mesh names. That's why previously, when working with baking inside 3ds Max, you have to do what we call the exploded bake. And the exploded bake is basically you need to push every piece you have apart from the other pieces in order to bake these pieces individually. Why? Because we don't want these kind of layers of the normal maps and stuff to overlap. We want everything separated. But with Substance Painter, what you need to do, instead of performing the exploded bake, you just need to give all the pieces that are gonna be baked and that are gonna be related, you're gonna give them the same name. The only difference is in the suffix, which is gonna be like underscore. For me, I use underscore HP and underscore LP, which means high poly and low poly. And Substance Painter, what it's gonna do is gonna actually bake every set of pieces. For the high poly and the low poly, is gonna bake them individually, and this is gonna actually help us, and we don't actually move anything, and it's gonna be just perfect for anything we're gonna do. And now, as we go to Substance Painter, we're gonna do some baking. What we're gonna do is we're gonna bring the low poly model, and we're gonna actually test if the bake is gonna work. Then we're gonna add all the maps with some settings that I'm gonna add. Basically, I am going to, from now on, I'm gonna create full courses for these for someone. If someone wants to see exactly what I'm gonna do, from now on, I'm trying to create complete 5, 6, or 7 hours courses. I'm gonna record everything and put it up for you guys. If you want to check it out, if you want something in depth, then please, you're gonna find it there. And it's gonna be this process is gonna be tedious because it's gonna be a lot of work, but I find this is the most suitable solution for this situation. And for the texturing here is gonna be, I'm trying here to do quick texturing because I want to cover it lightly, and we don't want to go in depth here, because I think even with a quick texturing, we're gonna be able to end up with a good enough result. And in the texturing, we're gonna see the fruit of our work here. And yeah, also the texturing part is the part I like to experiment with. It's fun to work with, and it's gonna be the reward of your hard work. And when you start texturing it, you're gonna, when you are finished, you're gonna export it, everything, the textures you need to export them. And when you load the poly here to Marmoset Toolbag, we're gonna do some lighting and some rendering. So yeah, we're gonna add some lights, 1 2 on the sides and 1 here on the top, back top right there. Change some settings, one here and there, and we're gonna be ready to render it. So I think this is it for this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.